All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the hidden mechanics behind anxiety and procrastination. Our goal here is simple, to help you finally regain control of your mind. We're going to take a really close look at exactly how our brains get wired to avoid hard things, and much more importantly, we'll explore the scientifically proven methods to rewire those exact same pathways.
Look, we've literally all been there, right? You sit down, completely ready to tackle this massive, super important project, and then out of nowhere, you suddenly get the overwhelming urge to reorganize your sock drawer or, check your email for the fifth time. So we have to ask ourselves, why on earth do we actively avoid the work that matters most to us? Why do we procrastinate even when we care so deeply about the actual outcome? Well, Dr. Judd Brewer, a brilliant psychiatrist and neuroscientist, basically shatters our guilt entirely with this idea. He points out that work avoidance is absolutely not a character flaw. It's really just a shortcut. It's a learned trick your brain takes to escape discomfort. Think about it. The higher your standards are, the more emotional weight a task carries. Your brain senses that anxiety, it feels that fear of failure, and it just quickly steers you towards something way easier. Let's move right into section 1, the hidden habit loop, and how we actually break this cycle. This right here is the exact anatomy of that avoidance habit. It's basically a three-step dance. It starts with step 1, the trigger. Maybe it's a high-stakes presentation that sparks a bunch of self-doubt. That leads to step 2, the behavior. You decide to endlessly scroll the news instead of actually writing the presentation. And then comes step 3, the result. Your anxiety drops, just for a brief, fleeting moment. But your brain registers that avoiding the task felt way better than facing it, and boom, a powerful habit is born. Now, if you take a look at these avoidance types, you can probably spot your own go-to move pretty quickly. Maybe you default to substitution, clearing out your inbox so you feel super productive, all while completely ignoring the big project. Or maybe you're a victim of research, telling yourself you just need to read one more article before you can possibly begin. Ultimately, all of these are just temporary relief valves for underlying anxiety. They trick your brain into feeling good while the real work just sits there untouched. Moving along to section 2, two paths to relief, comparing CBT versus ACT. Okay, so there's a really profound difference between changing what you think versus changing how you relate to what you think. On one hand, we have cognitive restructuring. This is a cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and it asks you to actively challenge your negative thoughts. It's like correcting a distorted mirror. If you think, I'm going to fail, you fight that by looking at the hard evidence of your past successes. But on the other hand, cognitive diffusion, which comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, takes a totally different approach. It teaches you to just watch those negative thoughts pass by, almost like you're watching leaves floating down a stream. You don't argue with them, you just mindfully observe them and let them go. Which brings us nicely to section 3, the RAN technique, a really practical mindfulness practice. Think of these 4 steps as a calming anchor for the exact moment you start to feel overwhelmed. First, you recognize the emotion, so name it. Maybe it's just the fear of a blank page. Second, you accept it completely without judgment. Just let it be there. Third, investigate it with kindness and curiosity. Where do you actually feel this anxiety in your physical body? And finally, nurture with non-identification. This is where you detach from those intense emotions and view them simply as passing clouds in the sky. Remember, you are not your anxiety. And here's a brilliant rapid-fire trick for you. Mentally adding this tiny, short phrase right before a negative thought is a clever linguistic hack. It immediately creates a healthy, mindful distance between you and your anxiety. So instead of thinking, I'm going to totally ruin this project, you just tell yourself, I'm having the thought that I'm going to ruin this project. It instantly shifts you from being a victim of the thought to merely being an observer of it. It's a real game changer. All right, let's get into section 4, the timeline of change, and how we actually go about building habits. So, for decades, pop psychology has sold us this incredibly comforting myth that it takes a mere 21 days to form a brand new habit. Fun fact, this idea actually originated back in the 1950s from a plastic surgeon who noticed how long it took his patients to physically adjust to their new faces. And somehow that ultra-specific observation was mistakenly applied to literally all human behavior. Crazy, right? But science tells a totally different story. A really famous study out of University College London tracked daily habits and found that the actual average time it takes to rewire your brain and form a new habit is 66 days. And honestly, depending on the person and the complexity of the habit, it can take anywhere from 18 to over 250 days. The takeaway here, we've got to be a lot more patient with our brains.
So how do we successfully hit that 66-day mark? Well, it's all about designing your environment so good habits become inevitable. First, start small. Please don't try to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow. Next, identify your cues so you know exactly when you're most vulnerable to procrastinating. Then, make the good habit ridiculously easy to start by reducing friction in both your physical and digital spaces. Make sure to visually track your progress because that keeps you motivated. And above all else, be flexible. Look, if you mess up on day 40, do not quit the whole shebang. Just wake up and start again on day 41.
Finally, let's hit section 5, the 3 gears for breaking bad habits. By following these 3 gears, we realize we really don't need brute force willpower to change. Gear 1, map the loop. Just clearly see what you're doing. Gear 2, get curious. Seriously, when you avoid your work, does that feeling of relief actually last? Or does it just lead straight to hours of guilt? Once you really look at it, you realize the old reward is actually pretty terrible, and your brain becomes totally disenchanted with it. That leads perfectly to Gear 3, finding a BBO, a bigger, better offer. This is where you replace that old, unhelpful habit with the inherently rewarding feeling of curiosity and the absolute expansiveness of finally overcoming your fears.
I'm going to leave you with this incredibly profound thought from Stephen Covey. Everything we've covered today points to one truth. Our destiny isn't some accident. It's constructed step by step, day by day from our habits. So I have to ask, which hidden habit loop are you going to map, defuse, and ultimately conquer starting today?